Well, good morning, Whitworth. It's great to see you this morning. This is a wonderful day to celebrate the beginning of Whitworth's 129th academic year. Dr. Simon, thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you for your leadership here at Whitworth. And I, too, want to welcome all of our new traditional students, first-year students, our new transfer students, graduate students who may be here, our continuing studies students. We are so grateful that you have chosen Whitworth as your place of study. And I would love to welcome all of our returning students back as well. If you're a returning student, stand up. Let's welcome you home as well. These guys don't have to be here today. Welcome back. Dr. Baird, thank you for carrying the pine cone this morning. Thank you for not dropping it. No, thank you very much for that act of service. Faculty and staff, it's good to see you. I hope that you've had a restful summer, that you're ready to go this academic year. Thank you for the service and ministry and education that you provide to our students. I'm grateful that we have two trustees and a trustee emeritus with us today. I'll introduce Dick Cole in just a little while, but I'm grateful that Ken Roberts and Andrew Erickson are here representing our fabulous Board of Trustees. Would you join me in thanking them for their leadership? Thank you. And it's always great to have President Emeritus Bill Robinson in the house. Bill, thank you for being here and for your support. Well, this summer, Julie and I celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary. Thank you. More credit to her. On August 8th, 1992, our families and friends gathered at First Baptist Church of Colorado Springs to witness our union. We were just kids then. She was 21, I was 22, but we thought we had much of the world figured out, or at least I did, Julie. But there was no way that we could have known the paths that we would explore together as we sought to serve God and to serve others with our lives. And believe me, there was certainly no way that we could have ever imagined ourselves here in 2018 as part of this incredible Whitworth community. I've heard it said that it is a grace that God doesn't allow us to see our futures. Because if we could, most of us would be intimidated and frightened, perhaps into paralysis, by the responsibilities we would hold, by the roles that we would play, by the challenges we would navigate as our future selves. I'm pretty sure my 22-year-old self would be terrified by the thought of my 48-year-old self, and not just because of my receding hairline. But I'm so grateful to be with you here now in this place. Nothing makes me happier or more fulfilled. As I stood there that Saturday back in 1992, looking into the eyes of the woman I love, I made promises, solemn promises. I promised that I would love Julie as unconditionally as I could. I promised that Christ would be my first love, and that together we would seek to serve Jesus in all that we would do as a married couple. I promised to stand with Julie in sickness and in health, in both prosperity and austerity, and we've seen all of those. And that in all things I would respect and honor her as someone made in the likeness of God. Well, I'm not perfect. Julie's not perfect, and no marriage is perfect. But I can say that by God's grace, I have lived faithfully into the promises that I made her so long ago, and so has she. Promises are something that we learn as kids. Do you promise? Yeah, I promise. Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. Promises made and kept by parents, for instance, influence how young children begin to perceive the world around them. Promises unkept teach us about a world that can disappoint us and remind us to be careful in whom we place our trust. New roles and new responsibilities and new chapters in our lives often provide opportunities to make promises. People entering public life regularly take oaths and make promises to serve the public interest as they begin their important service. Many in public offices and in our military, for instance, make promises to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to defend our country from enemies both foreign and domestic. To begin one's service with a promise is thought to set the stage for honesty and integrity and solemnity as one begins one's work. 8 years ago, on this very platform, Trustee Walt Oliver led me in making my oath and promise of service to Whitworth. I promised then, and I reaffirm here today, to faithfully and sensitively administer the affairs of Whitworth University in accordance, as Walt recited that day, with the Word of God, the laws of the state and nation, and the policies of the Board of Trustees, and to support and extend the mission of Whitworth University to honor God and to follow Christ and to serve humanity. Those were important words. Promises are important. Promises serve as the backbone of relationships, corporate and individual. Without the trust that accrues when promises are kept, relationships struggle to find traction. This is most easily seen, of course, when trust is destroyed, because promises are cast aside. Nothing hurts more than when someone we trust breaks a promise. Nothing can fracture a community more than when its leader neglects honesty and integrity or doesn't follow through with commitments. Promises are important. And as new chapters in our lives are begun, or as fresh relationships are formed, or when we find ourselves at the crossroads of life with new roles and new responsibilities, I think it's worthwhile to consider the promises we make to ourselves and to others. We know such promise making and promise taking are important aspects of God's narrative with us. The passage that Teresa read this morning marks the beginning of God's covenant, God's promise to God's people. The God we serve is indeed a God of promises. In that familiar passage, God calls Abraham to service. God asks Abraham to leave all that he knows, to travel to a far-off and unfamiliar land. God asks Abraham to trust God and to rest in the promises that God will make. Well, what were these promises? They were to bless Abraham and Abraham's descendants, to make a mighty nation out of Abraham's obedience, and to give Abraham land and security for what would become the nation of Israel. Little did Abraham know that out of God's promises, by the way, that had been kept time and time again, God would redeem not only the Jewish people, but would redeem all of us as well. By God's promises, God would save the world through the person of Jesus Christ, the fulfillment of God's promises throughout the ages. God makes and keeps promises. And we're reminded this morning in this passage, as God reintroduces himself to his people, at the beginning of that amazing story, that God is interested in building a record of trust. Well, given all of this, then, perhaps it's important for us, the people of Whitworth University, here at the beginning of the year, to begin this new chapter in our lives by making promises then to one another today. For those of us who have been called to Whitworth in years past, this has been our home. Reiterating familiar promises has value as it calls us back to our central commitments and to our foundations of trust and shared purpose. For those of you, most of you in the room today who are new to this community, new students, some new faculty members and staff members, today begins a journey for which promises and commitments made and kept could potentially serve for a lifetime. So what promises do we make to each other in this place that serve as the foundation of our life together in academic community grounded in faith? Well, let me make our project just a little bit easier this morning. Let's think a bit about the promises of the institution. That is, from those of us who serve as administrators, faculty, and staff members, the promises that we make to you students. Then we'll think a little bit about the promises that you students are making back to the institution. So first, the promises that Whitworth makes to you students. Well, the first promise that comes to mind for me is the promise of including all of you as full citizens of this community. We invited you here. And once here, we've invited you to make this your home. The relationships between students and the institution has to start with value, respect, and agency. Students, Whitworth is nothing without you. Whitworth was built for you. The educational enterprise animates all that we do here. So we promise to keep you at the center of our attention. Your needs and your learning will be our top priority, and not for just some of you. We promise to do everything in our power and by God's grace to ensure that all students are served well here. Majority students, students of color, domestic students, international students, first-generation college students, Christians, students of other faiths or of no faith, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, sexual minorities, students across the humanities and social sciences, the visual and performing arts, business and education, science and technology. Students, no matter your background or your experiences or your interests, no matter which path you chose or took to arrive here to Whitworth, we promise ourselves this day to serve you. Another promise that comes to mind is our promise to stretch you in your education here at Whitworth. Our faculty seated before you, they want you to grow and learn. And there are no shortcuts in this process, and at times it will be painful. Whitworth promises a liberating education, one that will expose you to new ways of thinking, alternative perspectives, all in an effort to expand your view of the world. It's only from that new vantage point that you can fully and critically discern your own values, beliefs, and commitments. Our educational program will ask you to do the things that you love to do, and it will ask you to do the things that terrify you. We promise to ask you to read a lot, and to learn, to write, and express yourselves well. We promise to present ideas that correspond with the ways you already see the world. We promise to expose you to ideas that will rock your world. We promise to be truth tellers when it comes to your progress, to reward extraordinary work on your part with good grades, and we promise to reward average work with average grades. We promise that nothing in your educational journey here will be window dressing, that every class, every moment will be designed to help you to grow in wisdom and insight. Whitworth also promises to see you students through to the end. You students have great influence, of course, over your own success here. Many of the choices that you'll make over the next few years will influence your success here. But the institution bears some responsibility too. This year, I'm excited to kick off the Pirates Persist campaign, an all-out effort to move Whitworth from good to great on student retention and graduation rates. Simply put, over the next 3 years, Whitworth will give singular attention to the ways it can contribute to achieving a 90% first to second year retention rate and an 80% six-year graduation rate, moving Whitworth into the top 5% of colleges and universities on those measures. We can do it, and we will do it. Students, we promise to think well about your success here. Well, the covenants and promises between God and Abraham were a two-way street. Yes, it's true that God's people weren't nearly as faithful to upholding their end of the relationship, but God's relationship with Abraham and Israel expected things, faithfulness, obedience, and undivided love on the part of the Jewish people. Mutuality is often important when making promises. So students, I would encourage you to think about the promises you are making to yourselves and to Whitworth as you begin this new year. What commitments will you uphold as you enter into or affirm our relationship together? I can't make your promises for you. Only you can do that. But you'd be disappointed if I didn't have a few suggestions for you this morning. So first, recognize that you are now a part of a learning community. As such, I ask that you see yourselves as people who have power. You have the power to contribute to that community's health and well-being. You also have the power to destroy it. Because Whitworth is willing to take risks for the sake of learning and growing, we are also vulnerable to those whose actions can rip at the fabric of goodwill, trust, and unity on this campus. In my 8 years as president, I've seen it happen. It happens when students don't treat each other with respect and dignity. It happens when ignorant and sheltered assumptions about the world shape the way we treat others. When students are dismissed because of their nationality or skin color, their first language, their social status, or politics, people begin to feel less than welcomed here. Here are other ways our fragile community can be harmed. By academic dishonesty, taking shortcuts to misrepresent your work or escape accountability in the learning exercise. By careerism, buying into the idea that the only value provided by a Whitworth education are the credentials that it provides to attain that first job or to earn that first salary. By narrow-mindedness, by devaluing classes that lie outside of your major or in the shared curriculum, or those that you're required to take. Or our community's fabric is also frayed by intellectual laziness, an unwillingness to attend events and speakers whose ideas are contrary to your own, or by intellectual hostility, actions taken to silence minority opinions or to prevent the full spectrum of ideas from being heard and judged on their merits. You see, students, as community members, you students have enormous power and responsibility to shape this place. And I hope that you will promise today to engage in those behaviors that uphold our values and sustain our community. Finally, stealing from a line from Dr. Leonard Oakland, I asked that you students promise to not give up at the first sign of problems. For you new students who are at the crossover ceremony, you heard Dr. Oakland when he wished upon you the problems of life and learning that would help you to grow into the people God is calling you to be. Dr. Oakland reminded us that we will depend upon God's grace as we navigate those problems. Students, let me encourage you with this. I'm persuaded that you are here at Whitworth by divine providence. Your being here in this room, this very moment, is a sign of God's grace and love for you. I'm equally persuaded that the God who called you here to Whitworth didn't just dump you here to fend for yourselves. Rather, I believe that the same God who called you here is the God who will sustain you here. Promise me this day, then, that you will not let the problems of life prevent you from attaining all that you dream of and aspire to. Promise me, rather, promise yourself that you will not let the first broken relationship, the first bad grade, the first feeling of not fitting in, the first feeling of homesickness, the first unexpected bump in the road, that you will not allow these things to keep you from achieving the goals you have set for yourself here. Be resilient. Heck, be a little stubborn. And know this, Those of us who are here to support you will walk this journey with you every step of the way, through thick and thin. We want you to succeed. We want nothing more than that. For all of us, then, faculty, staff, and students, as we begin Whitworth's 129th year of service to higher education and to Christ's church, I ask that we promise to uphold and extend Whitworth's mission to provide its diverse students with an education of both mind and heart, to equipping our graduates, indeed all of ourselves, in our communities, to honor God, to follow Christ, and to serve humanity. Let's promise to love on each other. Let's forgive each other freely when we don't quite live into the promises I've mentioned as fully or as faithfully as we'd like to. And to being unified in spirit for the welfare of this place that we love so much and for the glory of God. Have a great semester, students. God bless you.